We're talking today with Donald Stout of Muskegon, Michigan, and the interviewer is James Smither of the Grand Valley State University Veterans History Project. Okay, now Don, can you start us off with some background on yourself, and to begin with, where and when were you born?
In Muskegon, Michigan, July 20th, 1923.
Okay, and then did you grow up in Muskegon?
I grew up in Muskegon.
Okay, and what did your family do for a living when you were a kid?
My father worked at Continental Motors, and both my parents come from the farming community up around Fremont, Hesperia, and come to Muskegon to start off with.
Okay, now did your father keep his job during the Depression?
Yes, he did, but he worked very seldom.
Okay. So did he have to do other things to help support the family
Yes,
then?
he did. Yeah, he had to grow gardens and things like that. He went down and we had celery farms that people had, and he and a neighbor would go up and they give him some land to clear so they could use that for gardening for so many years, and so then they would take it over and grow their celery.
Mm-hmm.
So,
all right.
Managed to get by.
Okay, and then did you start picking up jobs when you were a kid or a teenager?
Yes, I did. I was a helper on a Coca-Cola truck when I was about 14, 15 years old. Yeah.
Okay.
Paper boy.
Paper boy, yeah.
All right. All right. Now, did you finish high school?
No.
Okay.
They pulled me out of high school. There was not very many jobs, so there was, I don't know how many, 3 or 4 of us lighter age to join the National Guards because we could get $1 on a drill night or something. And they'd pay us every couple of months, so that would give you money to go to the show or buy a candy bar.
Okay.
Well, it kind of backfired on us because they mobilized the guards and they pulled you out of school, and we were supposed to be gone for just 1 year in 1940, but it wound up that the war broke out in 42, and it was about 5 years later before we come back.
Right. Okay. Now, when did you join the Guard?
In June 30th, 1939, I joined the Guard.
Okay. And then what did you do in the Guard before they mobilized you?
I was just a regular infantryman, yes, in an infantry squad.
Okay. Now, did you go for any training with the Guard unit?
Just up to the Camp Grayling, we would go for 2 weeks during the summer to train, and then we train at the Armory once a week at that time.
Okay. And then what were you doing up at Grayling?
Well, they would have maneuvers, they would have Army maneuvers up there, and we'd be involved with that.
Now, one of the guys we interviewed said that they went swimming in the lake.
Well, they had a Lake Marguerite there, yeah, but no, I never went in it,
No.
but yes.
Because other guys said it was too cold.
Yeah, it was very cold.
All right. Just wanted to check on that one.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're in the Guard. And now at the time you joined the Guard, were you paying any attention to what was happening in the world, in Europe or anything?
No, I didn't pay much attention. No, I was too young for that. I should have, but I didn't.
Yeah. It's true that when you joined, the Germans hadn't invaded Poland quite yet. That came...
Yeah, I don't think
Because
so.
that's September of 39. So,
Yeah,
so there was no war.
No,
when you joined.
no.
Okay. Now, after you did join, then, did you talk at all about that?
Going to war? No, it didn't seem to sink into me at that time. I was probably too juvenile at that time.
Okay. All right. And then, so it's October 15th, 1940. First Guard units get called up, including yours.
Right.
Now, just for the record here, what unit were you in?
I was in Company G.
Of what unit? What regiment?
Oh, Regiment, 126th Infantry, 32nd Division.
Right. Okay. And so the whole division gets called up, and the 126th is a West Michigan regiment, and so yours is a Muskegon company.
Right.
Okay. So now once they mobilize you, what happens?
Well, we went down to Camp Beauregard in Louisiana.
Okay. And how do you get there?
Well, they went by train, but some of us went. I was lucky enough to have a car, and we went in a convoy, and a couple of the officers, they had house trailers, and they went down there, and that's the way we went down.
Okay, how long did it take you to drive to Louisiana?
As I recall, it took us either 2 or 3 days. We stayed overnight at different places. Of course, I slept in the back seat of the car. but,
So did you have some other guys drive along with you, or?
yeah, they had one other guy who would ride with me.
Okay. All right. And then what was Camp Beauregard like?
That was a primitive one. It was just strictly promenade tents, and then we was there for, oh gosh, I don't know how long, possibly a year. And they built a new camp, Camp Livingston they called it, and we moved over into that area, and they had screens and wooden racks up, and then promenade tent over it, so it was a little more luxury to it for us.
All right. Now, when you first got down to Beauregard, what were you doing?
We were just training, just infantry type training to get us ready, I guess, for combat.
Okay. And what kind of equipment did you have?
Well, some of it was back from World War One, but we gradually started getting a little better equipment.
Now, did you have World War I uniforms, or that style?
By the time we got there, yeah, I guess we had, no, we was at World War II. When I first joined the Guards, they had what you call wrap leggings. You'd have to wrap them. But they done away with that, and then they had a canvas type thing to put over your shoes or combat boots. Mm-hmm. Then later on, they come up with combat boots. So.
Okay. And did you have World War I type rifles, or did you have M1s?
Yeah, we started out. We had the O3s, and then they went to M1s.
Okay. Now, were they adding a lot of men to the regiment over that year?
Yes, they did. We got the first group of draftees from Muskegon County come down to our unit, and we had to have a training cadre to train them, to give them their basic training at this time. They come from Muskegon.
Right. Now, were you part of that, or?
Yes, I was, yeah.
Okay. Now, how old were you at that time?
At that time, let's see, 17, 18. I was probably between 17 and 18.
Okay.
I was 17 in October when I was mobilized.
When you went down. Okay. Now, did anybody know how old you really were?
Well, very few did. I don't think I'd have got promoted if they'd have knew how old I was, because I was a platoon sergeant when I was 18 years old.
All right. Now, the time that you're training in Louisiana, did you ever get to go off the base and do anything else?
Oh yes, you could go to town, and they'd have a truck take you to town and to go to the show. And if you didn't have a car or a vehicle of some sort, the only thing you had to leave town early to get back to camp, and they'd normally leave about 11 o'clock. So.
Okay. Now, was there much to do around these camps?
Not in the camp itself, there wasn't, but the town would be Alexandria, Louisiana. It's a fairly good-sized town, and then there was Pineville right across the river, and so, yeah, there was a lot to do there.
Okay. Now, did you get involved in any kind of large-scale maneuvers before you?
Yeah, they had, and I forgot what they called it. They had a big maneuver there, and it involved another division from, I think it was, I forgot there was the 34th Division or something. I don't remember what it was, but yeah, we had a big maneuver.
Okay, and what were you doing during that?
Well, it was playing war, or so to speak. They had a so-called enemy, and you'd go out and on patrols and different things, and they was trying to imitate what we was going to run into, but it was nothing jungle training than what we wound up having to do.
Because at this point, they were focusing on the war in Europe.
That's right.
So they thought that's where you might have to go.
Yeah.
Okay, and that was all before Pearl Harbor, too.
Yes, and after Pearl Harbor, then they sent us down to New Orleans. We had to guard the Industrial Canal and Lake Pontchartrain around there. And from there, they shipped us out to Fort Devens, Massachusetts. We was going to go overseas and over to Europe. and they give us winter clothing and everything, and then lo and behold, they changed their mind and put us on a train and shipped us back to San Francisco, and they loaded us up with some more recruits, so we had a full complement of men. And we went down to Australia, and during this time, the Coral Sea battle was going on, so we had to go around and come up from underneath and to bypass there, so we didn't run into it with our troop ships. And we landed in Port Adelaide. We were supposed to go to Brisbane.
Right.
And so that's how that happened.
Okay, now let's back up a little bit and fill in a few of the details here. How did you hear about Pearl Harbor?
It was on a Sunday night, and I was in Alexander, Louisiana. I was with 2 or 3 other guys, and we was just on our way back to camp, and I had a radio in the car, and that's how I heard it Sunday with Pearl Harbor.
And when you got back to camp, what was going on?
Oh, everything was exciting. They was getting us ready to move down to New Orleans, and yeah.
And then how long did you spend down around New Orleans?
Oh boy, I don't know. Just a couple, 3 months. We weren't there long before they shipped us off to Massachusetts.
Okay. But you didn't spend much time back at Livingston before you went to Massachusetts?
No.
Okay. All right. Now, did things quiet down a little bit? You first got down to New Orleans, and then you're looking for the Japanese, and they're not there.
Yeah. But when you're real young like that, it really don't sink into what the severity of it is.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then, do you remember how long it took you to get from Massachusetts to California?
No, I don't. We was on a troop train, but we slept on the train. They even had one of our kitchens was on there in one of the cars, and we'd eat on there and everything. And it was quite of a nice trip going across the country. I wasn't used to being on a train.
All right. And then when you got to San Francisco, did you stay there for a while?
They had a place in what they call the Cow Palace, and it was really stalls where they had different fairs and so on, and that's where they put us up at. And so then when we was there, and they tried to keep you busy, of course, they don't want idle hands, so, until we shipped out. And I always remember shipping out, the Japanese had sunk some freighter ships outside the Golden Gate Bridge out in the ocean there further. And I thought, boy, I was leaving out of there, and I never could swim, so I'd always in my mind that, oh my goodness, if they sink, I can't swim, not that it'd make a difference while you're out there, but.
All right. And then now what kind of ship were you on?
The SS Lurline. It was a luxury ship, and we made the first trip across as a troop ship. They converted it over to a troop ship. Okay.
And then where on the ship were you quartered? Were you below deck someplace, or?
Yeah, well, I was lucky enough to get a stateroom, and they had 3 different bunks in it and so on, and then they'd eat according to decks, you'd go to the mess hall to eat.
Okay. And do they have a whole regiment on that boat?
Oh yes, yeah, whole divisions on there, yeah.
All right. And then, did you get seasick?
What's that?
Did you get seasick?
No, I didn't, but some of them did. Yeah, I got on the verge of it, but I didn't get it. Some of them got really sick, yeah.
Okay. And then what do you remember about that trip otherwise? What happened over that time?
Well, the only thing I remember about it is, of course, hearing about, the Coral Sea battle going on, and then I was worried about submarines going to sink us out there. It was always on my mind. I couldn't swim, and so. And riding on that ship, when it got a little rough water, it'd come up out of the water, and then the screws would when it come back down, the old ship would shatter, and you'd think, oh my gosh, it's going to fall apart. But you got used to it. It went fairly fast.
Did they have a ceremony when you crossed the date line or the equator?
Oh yeah, they had that. I used to have a card there where I crossed the equator there.
What did they do? I mean,
Oh, they had different little ceremonies that the guys made up themselves. Who they made it up, I don't know. Somebody on there, the older people probably. But yeah.
okay. You got down to Adelaide, Australia, and then what happens to you?
Well, we was trained there again. Of course, he was always training and training on the wrong things because we wound up in the jungle fighting, and we was training like we was going to fight over in Europe or someplace.
Okay, so even though you've made it to Australia, they're still doing that.
And we got some education from the Australians that had been up in there and telling how the Japs had done certain things, like at night would throw mud balls and get you to do something to find out your position and so on. So we learned a little something from them, from the native trail bosses.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And did you see much of the civilian population there?
Oh yeah, because to me, Australia was about like America was 50 years prior that time. In fact, they was using horse and wagons to unload, the trains. They had trucks too. They call them lorries, but they even had horse and wagons. And then another thing is the railroads had different gauge railroads. You load the train to leave here, and you get to a certain point, you had to unload it and reload it on another one because the gauge of the railroad gauge was different.
Okay. Now, where were they sending you?
Back up to Brisbane then.
Okay.
Yeah.
And when you got up to Brisbane, then what happens?
Well, we went in, we made a camp, so to speak, out of in the woods. I was on the forward detail for Company G to get some promenade tent up in case it was raining, and when the men come in, they could put their barracks bags, not to sleep in. And we were right out in the woods, and they made a camp. And they called it Camp Tambourine at first. And they changed the name of it because some of our supplies come up on boats where the Japanese bombed one boat, and a young fellow was killed. He's out of Grand Rapids from our regiment, and his last name was Cable. So they changed the name of the camp to Camp Cable at that time.
All right. Now, were you getting anything closer to jungle training at this time, or was it still just general?
Well, it wasn't a good jungle training, no. No, it was just basic training, so to speak, the infantry, and different maneuvers and different things, and patrols.
Okay. All right. And then about how long did you stay there, do you think?
Well, we left, we got on the Liberty ship and left to go up to New Guinea in September. And I think Company E, if I recall, they flew them up there earlier than us. I think they did, probably a day early. And we landed in Port Moresby.
Okay. Now, do you remember what Port Moresby looked like when you landed there?
More or less of a native village, sort of. It wasn't a modern city or anything. And so then after we got into there, they moved us up towards, getting us ready to walk over the Owen Stanley Mountains. The battalion I was in got assigned to go there. They figured that this was a trail, a native trail where the Japanese could come in, if they wanted to, could come in and outflank Port Moresby. The main fighting is what they call the Gap, going over towards Santa Ana, and that's where the Australians and some more of the Americans are fighting there. So my battalion got assigned to go over the Owen Stanley Mountains.
So you're one of the Ghost Mountain Boys.
Yeah, that's the way I wound up being the Ghost Mountain Boys.
Now, what do you remember about that march? What was it like?
Oh, It was, well, we went on a company at a time. E Company went on first, F Company next, G Company was the next one, and of course, H Company was a heavy weapons company, and of course they were split up amongst the other three rifle companies. And we'd be a day apart going over. And every 4 days they would drop us rations from, well, we called it a bullet beef bomber, but it was really a Douglas DC-3.
Yeah, so
And they'd
C-47.
have to slow down enough to kick out the rations, but they'd have to find our drop grounds. So that 4 days, it'd have to last you. And
Now, were there problems with the resupply? I mean, would they miss or things break?
Yeah, and they would break, of course. Our 4 days rations was, it'd give us we'd get a little sack of rice, we'd put in a spare sock. We'd get some tea grounds and put in another sock, spare sock. We'd have 2 cans of heavy rations, something like a Campbell soup cans. And 2 cans of lights would have the biscuits in them and a coffee. I get 1 can of, well, we call it bully beef. It was corned beef, but it was a real grade corned beef. And that was and we'd get a D bar. It was, that's like a Hershey bar or something. And that was to last you for 4 days. So you learned how to make it last a little longer, because whenever we was going over this trail, while you go up and you go down, and it rained about 3 o'clock every day, just pour down on you. And of course, some guys couldn't go faster than others, so you'd make camp about 3 o'clock each night and try to get a fire going so the guys could cook their rations. And luckily, we didn't run into any enemy at this time. And what you would do is you'd cook your canteen cup almost full of rice, and you'd take one of the heavy rations like you and I are there, or maybe 3 of us, and we'd split this here like it was beef stew, one of them or something. You put a little bit in that rice and a little bit in his, and so on. And so then that would give you a full canteen cup full of food to fill you up. Well, the next night they'd use my heavy ration, so and they would split it up that way, to make that food last longer.
All right. And now, how long did that trip over the mountains take?
Boy,
It's like,
you'd have to look at the history book,
so
but
it's like
I'm
6 weeks
assuming
or
it
something?
took us, well, we started in September, November. Hey, I would say it took us more than a month. I would guess at 40-some days. I'm just making a guess on that one. I don't know.
that's, I think, what I've heard, 47 days, something like that.
Yeah.
Okay. And do you have any sense of how far you would go in a day? Just a couple miles, or?
Well, it's according to certain days you go further than others. Yeah.
And what effect did that march, what did that have on the men?
Well, the physical part of it was bad, and some people could handle it better than others. Yeah, I guess it was according to the way you was raised at home. I had married men in my outfit. I was a platoon sergeant at the time. They couldn't handle it. They had to eat their rations before the 4 days was up. Well, then you try to have to share along with yours that you saved to get them in. You say, next time, hey, you're going to go hungry. But they'd have to learn. But in a while, they learn.
All right. And once you finally, and that were men getting sick too? Did you have?
Oh yeah, and if you happen to get sick, you don't want to get sick because they'd leave you behind. What we do is set up then along the trail, and following this whole procession, we had a platoon of aid men, and they would pick them up and bring them along later. We had a couple of them that come down with malaria, and we had to leave them with a canteen of water. But the next day, see, these companies were a day apart. The next day, another company would come through this one and pick up these guys.
Now, did you have any New Guinea natives who were carrying things for you? Or?
Yeah, they had native carriers too, not in our outfit, but was carrying behind like ammunition and extra ammunition and so on. The ones that was carrying BARs, that's a bigger weapon, they was carrying these heavy ammunition. We'd get saddle sores on their back from carrying them, yeah.
Okay. And so you've made it now. Once you come down and you get into the area near Buna, was the rest of the division already there?
No, they were over in near Santa Ana and over that'd be north of them. And in fact, when we got down there, we got come down in there. I think later on they made an airport out of it, the Dobadera airstrip. It was a kunai patch field there. And that night, before we went to Buna, we had to cross the river, and somebody swam across and put a rope across, and then we had to, of course, overhead, we had to hang on that rope and cross and sleep at night. All wet in there, and then march. And then the night we went into Buna, we had to follow combat wire and water up to our chest. And so when we broke out of there, it was just breaking daylight, and the sun was silhouetting us against this kunai patch. The kunai grass is about that high. And that was, we run in the outposts of the Japanese. And the thing that always stuck in my mind is our heavy weapons were set up on one end of this field. That's water-cooled machine guns, 30 caliber. And then the Japanese had their machine guns set up on this field. And our machine guns would fire, and you could see that kunai patch go over, and then they'd let up, and then the Japanese fire, and the old kunai grass would go back the other way. Then the order come down, says, fix bayonets, take off. And so we took off, and we overrun their outpost that morning.
Now, did you take some losses then when you did that?
Did I do it?
Did some of your men get hit?
Oh yeah, we lost a lot of men there, yeah. The intelligence was bad. What was supposed to happen in our company anyway, is the first platoon was supposed to go in the village, Buna village, and take over all the huts on the left-hand side. Second platoon was to take over the huts and clear them out on the right-hand side, and my platoon was supposed to come in and clean it up and secure the whole, both sides of the things, and the other two platoons going to set up a defensive position after they went through. Well, it wasn't that easy. And first of all, they had about 3 different trails, and nobody knew which trail to go, and the Japanese had them cross-fired each trail with machine guns. So we lost a lot of men there, yeah.
Okay, so you overran the outpost. Could you go very far beyond that, or did you get stuck?
Well, I didn't. I got stuck there because the next couple of days later, before I was going to a meeting at up the company headquarters called us to me to come up to see something, and they started shelling us, and I got a piece of shrapnel through both my legs. So at the time I didn't realize it, but it was $1 million wound. I got a chance to they hauled me out of there.
Okay, now once you got hit, what did they do? How did they treat you? How did they get you out of there?
Well, what I did is I could hobble a little bit, and a fellow really wound up being a neighbor man of mine. He got killed later on in the Philippines. He come out and give me a hand, and you can hear the guns going off in the background before the mail comes in. By then he hit the deck. And anyway, as we got back up, we made it back to the aid station, and then the native carriers, they carried me and some of the other guys back a little bit further, and they had a Jeep. They could lay us stretchers on the Jeep and took us back to the Dobadera airstrip, and It took us 40-some days to walk over. It took about 45 minutes to plane to fly us back to Port Moresby.
All right. And did they put you in a hospital in Port Moresby, or did they send you?
Yeah, they did there, and then they flew us from there. For me at this time, they was flying a flying fortress back, and they put 22 wounded aboard it. A couple engines were out on it. It was all shot. It was going back for repairs, and they put 2x4s over the bomb bays and stuff like that. And of course, the inside of the flying fortress is, you know, it's no upholstery. You can see, and they got the waist gun. And I was on crutches, and they says, "Can you fire a machine gun?" I said, "Yeah." They said, "Well, you be the waist gunner." So I was a waist gunner on one side, and another guy was on the other side. And we get in towards Townsville, and well, before we got there was a plane flying. We didn't know what it was, and they thought maybe it's the Japanese. I thought, oh my God. He says, "Now make sure you don't shoot your own wing off, you know." But it turned out he plane, wherever it was, it took off, and so I didn't have to do any firing. But anyway, we get in toward Townsville, and well, one of the engines quit working on it, and here's this, I don't know what he is, one of the airmen anyway. We had a skeleton crew on it. He's running back and forth, and I could see where that tail rudder would go up, you know, hydraulic, go back down, go back. And I said, "Well, what's the problem? What's the problem?" He circled it, and I seen the ambulances all down there in Townsville. Says, "Can't get the landing gear down." Well, I didn't know it at the time. I guess they can crawl out in the wing and crank it down, but it's really hard to do. So but individually they got it down, and they got us down. But I thought, oh, now we're going to pancake in, but we didn't.
Was that your first trip in an airplane?
Yeah, I think it was. Yeah, I think it was.
Okay, so not a normal introduction to flight. Yeah.
Yeah, and of course the ambulances was waiting for them people on board, the wounded, and I was like, oh, they're waiting for us when we're going to pancake in.
Right. Okay. So now, once you land, then how long did you spend in the hospital?
Gee, I don't know how long. I was up in Townsville, and then they shipped me, that is at least me and some of the other fellows, down to a resort area outside of Brisbane called Coolangatta. And we was there for a while in a resort area and by the ocean. And then pretty soon when our outfit come back from New Guinea, then we reorganized again, and we got very few replacements. This war in the Southwest Pacific at that time was a kind of a holding war. They wanted to get the war over in Europe. So the only time we started getting a lot of replacements is once the war was over in Europe. Then they started filling our companies out.
Okay. So how many men should a company have had at that time? If it's a full-strength company?
Full-strength company was right around 200.
Okay. And so when you're back in Australia, about how many men do you think you had?
Oh, hey, when they come back, they lost so many men outside of being killed and wounded that they made one company out of the whole battalion.
Mm-hmm.
They had very few men, yeah.
I guess a lot of them were sick. A lot of them had malaria and things.
Malaria and so on, yeah.
Okay. And now, did some of those guys recover and rejoin the unit?
Oh, yeah, I had malaria, oh, yeah. But not up there, of course. Okay. But, and some of them had malaria real bad, you know, they lost all their hair and everything.
Okay. Now, do you have a sense for how long then you spent waiting to do something else, or when was the next operation?
Boy, I don't know. Time goes by so fast. We wasn't there too long, and they shipped us back up to New Guinea again. By the time we got reorganized and some extra troops, yeah.
Okay, and then where did you land then in New Guinea? Was
on that
Sidor
one.
first, or was there...
The other side of Weewak, I think we made a
Okay.
landing. And then our next stop, I think, was Adapie, and we set up a defensive position there, I remember, because I was on guard duty and done a stupid move there. I was on an outpost along the river, because we'd bypass the Japs, and of course they're trying to get back to their lines. And a patrol would come out every day to bring you rations and mail or whatever you had. And they got word that they wanted me back at headquarters. They're going to make me first sergeant in the battalion headquarters company. So instead of waiting for the patrol, I started back by myself. And we was about, I would say a mile, 2 miles out ahead of the main defensive position. And when I was going back by, these trees, they have big roots come out like this. And of course you get yourself keyed up to hear all kinds of noises. And I could hear what I thought was possibly a patrol or something. Here I'm out by myself. I ducked down behind these here trees, them roots, and it was all quiet. And I would go again, and I'd hear some noise. Well, I finally made it back to my lines, and the guys on the defense said, "You hear anything?" I said, "Nah, I've been up here too long. I'm starting to hear things. I thought I heard something out there," and the patrol was just going to go out to give supplies and so on out there. And I just got back behind the lines in the kitchen, and I heard some fire going on. And they run into a Japanese patrol. The only thing I can think of is that patrol seen me, and they seen me all by myself, and they let me go through. They didn't know what was behind me, and so that's all I can know. I lucked out some way.
All right. Now, in these landings at Weewak and Sidor, were those opposed, or were they quiet when you landed?
Normally they shell the area beforehand, and then when you land, you get on there, and of course you can't stay on the beach because you got to have territory to move, and then that's when they open up. They give it to you then.
But was there much opposition, or did you push them back?
No, well, we didn't have a lot like some of the landings that I'd seen later in the history that they had it worse than we had it. But yeah, we had some fire, yeah.
Okay. All right. Now you get made first sergeant, and now is this for your company, or was it for the headquarters company?
For the battalion headquarters company. They moved me from Company G up to battalion headquarters company as a first sergeant.
Okay. And what were your duties as first sergeant?
Well, as first sergeant of the company, you're the top sergeant. You're doing, make sure that the company is operating more or less. You're the one that run the company for the company commander.
Okay. But what do you actually do?
Well, you do the paperwork. You make out the morning reports. You make out the injury report, the duty report. The ones that are wounded or killed in the morning, you make out the morning report. You put the map coordinates wherever there was buried at, how many KIAs, and well, basically, and you make sure that the men are, when you get an assignment, that you give it to one of your other sergeants, platoon sergeants, to handle, and yeah, you make sure you run the whole company.
Now, did you have responsibilities for supplies, or?
No, the supplies come in, well, the supply sergeant, he would get it through regimental supplies.
Mm-hmm. Now, do the supply sergeants, do they report to you, or?
Yeah.
Okay. And normally then, as a sergeant, would you stay back in the company area, or do you go out to the lines?
Well, you would be back more or less with the company commander. You're his right-hand man.
Right. Okay.
You're back that little bit that helps. You're not taking a patrol out and everything like you was before.
Now, do you remember who the company commander was when you took that job?
No, I don't.
Okay.
I remember the company commander I had in G Company when we was in the Buna, his name was Claddy Bailey. I think he was out of Indiana. He was only a first lieutenant at the time. In fact, we only had 3 officers to the company, and one was the company commander, the other one was second in command, and then the other one's a weapons company commander. So all 3 rifle companies, the platoon sergeant had to act as lieutenant. So in my case too, I had to act as a lieutenant commander of the 3rd Platoon. And he later on, my company commander, got to up as far as lieutenant colonel, but they put him in the 3rd Battalion as a commander, and he got killed in up in Leyte, I think it was, later on.
Okay. All right. So now you got this job. Was it A to B where they made that switch, or Sidor, or where was that when you became the?
What's that?
Where were you when you became the company sergeant?
The first sergeant.
Or sergeant, yeah.
A to B.
A to B. Okay. And then, how long after that do you move on?
Wasn't too long, and then went to Monte Island in the Halmaheras.
Okay.
And then from there, we wasn't there very long at all. And then went up to Leyte, and then we went into quite a bit of action there again.
Okay. Now, do you remember anything about Morotai? That was a different island. That's a small island.
Yeah, it was very little fighting for us there, anyway. No, it was an island setting off by itself, and you know, I guess the ones that made the landing there, they had a little action, but because there was supposedly some ships sunk out there in the bay and so on.
Yeah, and was there an airfield there? Is that what you were?
I don't recall whether there's an airfield or not there.
Okay. All right. But then, now, as you're going from place to place, did you ever go back to Australia, or was it just going on to the next island?
For just the first time, when I got wounded, and then from Buna and went back there. But once we left at that time, then we never went back.
Okay. Now, is the battalion getting smaller and smaller as you do this?
Yeah, and until, like I say, until the war was over in Europe. Very few replacements until then.
Okay. Now, do you remember sailing up into the Philippines? Were you with a large convoy then, or on your own, or?
We was in a convoy because the Japanese was shelling us, and I was worried about them hitting our ship, but luckily the ship I was on, it didn't get hit when we made the landing there in Leyte.
Yeah. Do you have a sense of how long it was between the first landing and when you landed? Were you a few days later?
I'm thinking it was 3 or 4 days. It wasn't just the day after or anything.
Right. Because I think on the day after there was a big naval battle right there in Leyte Gulf.
Yeah, and I recall, the naval battle where we was at wasn't going on. Now we was getting some action from them, but I don't know about that one.
Were there Japanese aircraft overhead?
Yeah, okay. Dropping bombs on us.
Were they hitting anything?
Well, they hit some ships behind me, but it didn't hit the one I was on, so luckily.
And do you remember what kind of ship you were on then?
Probably a Liberty ship, but I don't know.
Yeah, so not a really big one?
No.
Okay. All right. And then once you landed on Leyte, what did things look like?
Oh, it was raining and it was a mess. And of course, once you fight in some action like we had in New Guinea, then whoever landed first, they pushed the Japanese up into the hills, and then we relieved them, the Marines and some more infantry, and that's when we fought they said we broke the Yamashita line there. The Oromok took over the highway, we'd cut across it there. And we lost quite a few men that to a place. You could go into them there streams they had up in there, and dead bodies laying out there, and maggots would just to the water line, just covered with them, and then you had to drink water, and you'd try to go downstream to get a little more water, and of course you put halazone tablets in it, but even that was in your mind there. And if you at night you'd had to have a little shelter there, you'd put your helmet out there to catch some rainwater. Well, then they start shelling you, and you dump the rainwater out and put on your helmet, and so drinking the water wasn't too good a deal.
Right. Now, while you're in Leyte, would the Japanese try to probe your lines or attack?
Yeah, oh yeah.
Okay.
In fact, my neighbor man that kind of helped me when I was wounded, he got killed up there. They overrun the Company G's position. They was up over the hill. I was with headquarters company at that time. And yeah, they overrun and they bayoneted them and everything there, yeah.
All right. And now when you guys would attack, did you have much by way of artillery support or air support or anything like that?
No, because in the jungle you can't too hardly to wheel them their artillery rounds. They didn't have these recoilless rifles like they got now, you know. And, very little artillery round.
Did you have mortars or?
Oh, they have mortars, 81 millimeter mortars, and then of course in the rifle company had 60 millimeter mortars, smaller ones. Yeah.
But really you didn't get to use a lot of heavy weapons against the Japanese. So.
No.
Okay. And did you have people who kind of learned effective ways of fighting in the jungle? Were there any tricks you could use?
Oh yeah, after a while, yeah, you learn to be on the alert, or you got to do or survive. In fact, when I come home, my mother couldn't open the bedroom door without me blinking wide awake. But now they can run a truck through there, I guess.
All right, so you just get a sort of more heightened senses and are just more aware.
You have to stay alive, yeah.
Okay. And do you have a sense of how long you were fighting on Leyte? Was it just a couple of weeks or longer?
God, I think it was longer than that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know if the history books will tell you, but
right.
Then we moved from there to Luzon. Now, we didn't get into the big city again. They pushed us up in the hills. When they pulled me out, we was headed toward a resort area called Baguio.
Mm-hmm.
But, so we was up in the hills again fighting.
Okay, and was the fighting any easier or harder than it had been in Leyte?
Well, a little different. It wasn't a swampy area, but it was a little different because they was cut into the sides of the banks, and they had these here, they'd come out and they had crossfire, and you had to get them out of these holes on the sides of the hills, or I don't want to call them mountains, but higher hills, and you had to put a pole charge in there and blow that up. That wasn't easy. What you did is you made a little box and you put, I forgot the name of the explosive, but you'd put that in there and put it on the end of a bamboo pole. Then you'd have some guys protect you because they had these here holes set up so this one protect that one and that one protects that one. You had to keep them under cover while you were going up and trying to blow this hole shut. And you smoke a cigarette and you make your fuse real short and you light the fuse and stick that in there and blow it. If you made the fuse too long, they'd reach out there and throw it out.
Now, did you have to do this yourself or did you just...
Yeah, well, either that or somebody has to do it, yeah.
But you did do that at some point?
Yeah.
Okay, so you didn't just give the order for someone else to do it?
No.
Okay. Now, as a company sergeant, I mean, would you try to lead by example or do the things you wanted to do?
Well, yeah, you can't sit back and say, well, hey, take over this or that. They ain't gonna go very far with them. No.
All right. Now, as you're moving through the Philippines, did you ever see much of the civilian population there, or any Philippine soldiers or guerrillas or anything?
Well, we had Filipinos assigned to our unit, more or less for, I guess you'd call it, they speak a different language, in order to question people or talk to people. But no, not as fighting troops. He didn't. He wasn't in our unit along with us. Yeah, and as far as getting into the civilian population, no, my outfit never got into that. We was always up in the hills or in the jungle or someplace like that.
All right. Now, when did you actually leave the unit?
In July 1945, I forget the date, but I was back in Chicago. I was discharged July 12th.
Okay, it's probably very beginning of July or late June.
Beginning of July, about.
Now, this was at this stage in the war. They have a point system, and people who've been different amounts of time would come out.
Yeah.
How did that apply to you?
Well, that applied to me because I was a first sergeant. They called them essential, and they couldn't let me go. Well, the minute they lifted that, I had the most points in the company, so I got a chance to come home. So I got back to Fort Sheridan, and of course the war wasn't over yet. July, it was in August. He says, "What do you want to do? You want to sign up again, stay?" I said, "What do you do?" He says, "They give you 30 days and ship you back to your outfit." I said, "Hey, I'm lucky. I don't want my luck to run out. I'm going to go home."
Do you remember anything about the trip back from the Philippines? How did they get you back to the States?
In a Liberty ship. Yeah, there was no action at all. We lucked out there. I mean, there was nothing. They just come back and landed in San Francisco.
And did the ship sail by itself, or did you have escorts?
Yeah. Well, no, we had, I don't know, a destroyer escort, and I don't know, there was a couple of ships, but no, it was no big convoy or anything.
All right. And was it an easy trip, or did you have storms, or?
Yeah, it was an easy trip, as I recall. I don't remember any, and I would have got shook if I was out there in the water.
Yeah, because you made it this far and then hadn't wound up in the ocean yet. All right. Now, once so you get back to Fort Sheridan. So did you get discharged then, or what do they do?
Yeah, I got discharged. The minute you don't want to re-sign up again, yeah, you get discharged, and they give you transportation back to your hometown, you know, or a ticket or something. Yeah. And I come back on a Greyhound. You know.
All right. And so what did you do once you got back home?
Well, I was home a couple of weeks, and I went down to Continental to go to work, and got a job there. And because I didn't belong to any union shop, they said if I had 30 days in the union, they would count my time I was in the service as part of the thing. So, but lo and behold, I went to work for 2 weeks, and the war was over, and I was laid off. So later on, I put my name in. One of the other men that used to be in my outfit was on the police force, and he said, "Why don't you join the police force?" Well, so I put my name in for the police force, and I joined the police force. And of course, they didn't pay any money in them days. So why I stayed, I don't know, but I did.
Okay. Now, did you rejoin the National Guard?
Then after they started the National Guards up again, I won't say on the first month they did it, but shortly thereafter I rejoined them again. And well, I was offered a direct commission 2 different times when I was overseas, but I turned it down. And you tell people that, and they say, "Yeah, baloney." But you see what happens if you take your commission, they don't leave you in your company. They ship you to a different battalion or a different regiment or something. And I didn't want to leave my company. And of course, as a first sergeant, I made $138. As a second lieutenant, I'd make $150. And so it wasn't that much difference. But being a first sergeant, I wouldn't have to take patrols out anymore. As a lieutenant, which I had to act as in the beginning, was a dangerous job. Very few of them survived it. And so that's the reason I didn't take it. So when I got back, I got a chance to go to Fort Benning, and I got my commission. I wound up, when I retired from the Guards, I was executive officer of the same battalion I started out as a private in. I was a major, and school qualified up through lieutenant colonel.
All right. And when did you leave the Guard then?
Well, they broke up this unit in Muskegon, and they shipped the battle group. The headquarters was going to be down in Indiana, and they had what they call weekend drills. Well, I didn't get every weekend off on the police force, and so I retired in '68 because if it didn't happen on my weekend, I could force the city to let me go.
Mm-hmm.
But I thought I had to make my living here, so I better time to get out. So I retired and got out.
All right. Now, did your unit go to Detroit during the riots?
I was there. I was there in the Detroit riot. We was up in Camp Beauregard at the time. Instead of coming home, they shipped us right to Detroit.
And what did you see in Detroit?
Well, it was a different type of fighting, so to speak. See, in the jungle, you're fighting an enemy. Here, you don't know who your enemy is. They put us up in a school there, and we weren't there too long, and we had to patrol around, but you know, it wasn't too bad.
Okay, so things had quieted down a little bit by the
Quieted
time
down by that time, yeah.
that you got in there.
When the Guard was all there, yeah.
Because I think they even sent up part of the 101st Airborne. I mean, they were,
Yeah.
some of those guys were there too. All right. Now, to think back then over the time that you spent in the service, are there other kind of events or things that kind of stand out in your mind that you haven't brought into the picture?
No.
You
Well, how we got wounded, you know, where you switched in your slits trench there, where the shell come in. and-
yeah. Well, I was talking about when we overrun their position. See, when we ran into Buna, I just got through having malaria. In fact, my company commander told me, he says, if you want to, he says, we'll make you acting liaison between company and battalion headquarters, a liaison officer. You know, just not in rank physically,
Mhm.
just acting that way. And I said, no, like a stoop. I says, no, I trained with my battalion, or my company, I'll stay as a company or first or a sergeant in there. So I was in a weakened condition, and we overrun the outpost. And that night, we set up a defense course for night coming on, and I was out on a point and where the water was out over here, and as the tide comes in, by this water raises up. So I was really tired from the night before, all night walking through the swamp and so on and getting there. So I'm down in the foxhole, and I've got my BAR over here, man, and my company runner was in a foxhole just the other side of me. Communications were different back in them days. You had a company runner, and you didn't have the type of radios they got nowadays. So anyway, to make the long story short, as night went on, I must have fell asleep, and I woke up, and I could hear some walking in the water out there. And I thought, oh, the first thing you grab for is your rifle. My rifle ain't there. And so I thought, the Japanese is creeping up because we'd overrun their position, and they're trying to get back to their lines. And I could almost feel a bayonet going through me, or a shot or something. I'm kicking dirt and kicking. Of course, the Australians said, you know, they tell us ahead of time how the Japanese would kick dirt around, you know, and just to find out your position. Well, finally, I says to my runner, his name was Bauer. I said, Bauer, he says, some Jap has got my rifle. I'm going to creep in your foxhole because your own men can shoot you at night if you ain't careful. So I went to creep out of my foxhole, and I crept over my rifle. I must have turned around in my foxhole and not known it in the night. And I could just feel the blood drain back down in me. And come to find out, this noise that was out there was, well, we used to call it a shike poke, a big crane-like bird was walking out there. And here I thought it was the Japanese coming in on me.
All right. And then when you got wounded, then there was something about,
You know how the shell come down and you just switched positions?
Oh, yeah. Well, you see, I told you before, we was at a company meeting up there, and they started shelling us, so other men was out in foxhole. Normally you build two-man foxholes as narrow as you can. So I jumped in a foxhole with another guy. Well, we shoulder to shoulder, and so I said, hey, the next volley, I'll turn around and I'll put my feet up, and I'll go down next to your feet so we can fit more into this thing. And the next round come in, took the top of the tree out above us and put it right down through both my legs. If I hadn't turned around, it'd been down through my stomach. He didn't get hit at all, that guy.
oh, works that way.
Yeah, but there's quirk things that work out.
Yeah. So I was going to ask, when you mentioned at the point when you got the news that you were going to become first sergeant headquarters company, you went by yourself back from your observation post. Did you at the observation post? Did you have a radio, or were you just out there all by yourselves?
Well, we were out there by ourselves, yeah.
Okay. So, because you were a long way in front of the lines,
Yeah.
what would happen if somebody showed up?
Well, you would have to work your way back to the line to give them some information, yeah.
Okay. But you wouldn't start shooting at that point.
No.
That far forward.
No. See, a patrol, there's two types of patrol. There's a combat patrol and there's an expert, or you're just trying to find out information, so
Right.
you don't want to let the people know where you're at if you're just out doing that.
Okay. That makes sense. All right. If you look back at the time that you spent in the service, how do you think that affected you?
Made you grow up in a hurry. Yeah, and I could think the way I was brought up, it helped me along the way. It helped me survive, I would say.
All right. Well, our tape is just about to stop, so I think I will close here and thank you for taking the time to talk to me today.
Well, I was going to ask